Welcome on Texas Football. I'm Bobby Burton, your host, joined by CJ Vogel. We're going to talk a little area distribution, I guess is the best way to put it, for University of Texas football recruiting. CJ and I, in the last 24, 48 hours, been trying to break down some numbers post-signing day and try to look a little deeper in what has really helped Texas and Steve Sarkisian and the group of coaches pinpoint players and where they go to find the players. And, I think the first thing we need to say is that in 2023, this 2024 class, it was DFW Domination. I mean, the Longhorns signed 6 guys in this class that are from DFW, plus another one, Jordan Johnson-Rebel, who's from Fort Worth originally, right? So really 7 guys. But it's not just the fact that they signed those guys, CJ. It was the fact that they did it and were very selective in doing so. I counted only 14 guys total in the DFW area that had true offers that were committable offers. There were some guys, and I don't want to name names, but there's like 3 or 4 offers out there that they didn't really follow through with. You know what I mean? Yeah. But 7 out of 14, the guys that they really lost, Makai Saina, Corian out of the offensive lineman out of Arlington, Corian Gibson, the defensive back out of Lancaster. Then you probably look at Brian Westco. They probably would have taken him, even though he wasn't their number one guy, CJ. He's going to Clemson. Caden Durham, the running back out of Duncanville, they probably would have taken because they were trying to focus in on Duncanville so much. But here's the ones they did get. Colin Simmons, defensive end out of Duncanville. Alex January, defensive tackle out of Duncanville. Xavier Filsamy, young man out of McKinney, a safety. Daniel Cruz, he's in the mid-cities at North Richland Hills. Xenia Umeozulu, he's at Allen. Parker Livingstone at Lovejoy. And then JJR, Jordan Johnson-Rebel, who we said Florida, but also started his high school ball in Fort Worth. I look at this list, and one of the things that grabs me right off the top, CJ, and get your take on this. I mentioned those 6-7 guys for Texas. Of all the guys that Texas offered, even kind of tangentially offered, the only team that even came close was OU with 3. And frankly, Texas didn't really push on 2 of those 3. Nigel Smith, Eli Bowen, Peyton Bowen's brother, and Jalen Hardy. Texas, I don't even know if they really pushed for any of those 3. So that was the second one. And then Clemson had 2. Nobody else, Texas Tech, nobody else really. LSU only had 1 guy in the Metroplex that Texas wanted. And that's a big one. Dominating DFW, CJ, has been a big deal for Texas from the start, right? And that's one of the places where it goes back to Mac Brown saying, we know that's where OU tries to make hay, and we've got to go in there with our best recruiters. That's why he hired Bruce Chambers back in the day. Well, Steve Sarkisian did something similar. He put Jeff Banks in DFW. And now Jeff Banks is obviously one of the best recruiters on the staff, and that has paid dividends. You're from DFW originally. That is it's a huge metro. I mean, you were talking about how you told me the other day, you lived next to Bumper Pool growing up, the guy that played at Arkansas. It's a very cosmopolitan city, and kids grow up being fans of anybody and everybody. But to own or to dominate one of the top metro areas in the country, and a place that you're very familiar with, what do you think that means, and how do you see that, CJ?
Yeah, I think you mentioned it a little bit there. It's a melting pot of fan bases. There's not one school that dominates the area. There's not really one school in the area that you can look at and say, this is home for college football in the DFW area. I know TCU had that good run in 2022. SMU was coming along, but on the grand, stage, there's not a national presence in terms of a home DFW university. And so as a result, it's a fighting ground. It's a big battle area for schools all across the country to be able to come in and fight. And Bobby, we talked about it not too long ago. The state championships this year were dominated by DFW teams. And I think that's a testament to, one, the coaching, the talent, and obviously the development in those programs that are going on in the DFW area. Trust me, I grew up in Allen. I'm aware of what it's like to see powerhouses compete week in and week out with Allen, DeSoto, Duncanville. Cedar Hill at the time was one of those big programs as well. There's obviously been some new age kind of schools coming along when Argyle, South Oak Cliff, Melissa, Lovejoy. It's been fun to watch it grow, and it certainly is producing in the rate of talent that is comparable to anywhere else in the country. So credit to Texas for making it a priority, and the guys that they're adding to this class out of DFW. I mean, you just went down the list. All of them figure to be, one, very well coachable, and two, the talent is immense. You can see it on the film. They figure to be great, guys to produce once they get to Texas and acclimated to the college program.
Well, I'm looking at the list of the DFW list. Colin Simmons and Alex January, both LSU was a big player there, right? Yeah. Could have went to OU, either one of them. Xavier Filsaime could have went to LSU, Florida, Oklahoma, wherever. Daniel Cruz had offers from Oklahoma, etc. Zena Umeozulu, Oklahoma was all in on him. Of course, so was Texas A&M. Then you have Parker Livingstone, another guy that was, I think, did LSU finish second for him? Is that accurate to say?
I know Arkansas and South Carolina were much in the mix for him as well.
Okay, gotcha. And so my point on all this is that it's not so much that Texas signed just six guys. Is that they did it over just about everybody on each one of them. You know what I mean? And so it was, they dominated Dallas this year. They really did in the Fort Worth Metroplex. I do think that you're right. I mean, I think there is a little orange tinge in Dallas compared to other ones. Like I think there's a little bit more Texas fans at OU or LSU or whatever, what have you. But it's hard to be, a Metroplex of 6, 7, however many million people are up there nowadays. It's hard to be just one dominant. Maybe, though, it feels like Steve Sarkisian and Jeff Banks are reprioritizing it the right way at the right time.
I would agree with that 100%. And I think, like I said, the South Oak Cliffs and the Lovejoys, Melissa, you can throw them in there as well. These are new age programs where it's no longer, the DeSotos and the Duncanvilles. While they won't ever go away, it's brand new, breeding grounds for these talents and the pipelines at those schools, like we've seen with a Cam Williams to lead into a Colin Simmons, Alex January at Duncanville. Obviously, we've seen it at DeSoto with Trey Wisner, Jonte Cook, and now you're looking at Byron Washington also in the 2025 class as well as Sael Reyes too. So getting in and getting a foothold in some of these programs that are competing for state championships is very important in terms of maintaining a pipeline of development and interest in the program.
Yeah, no question. And you're talking about Melissa. That's where Trevor Goosby's from last year.
Yeah,
and so it's just Lovejoy has been that's where you went to high school. That's been an up and coming program as well that has produced a number of people. And I think that it continues to be a place where Texas has to do well because it is ultra competitive on the national landscape. I mean, Dallas is one of the 2 or 3 cities that are most heavily recruited, and Texas, I think, just did an outstanding job in the Metroplex. All right, let's look at the other areas of the country and try to break that down a little bit for folks. So other areas, Houston had 3, okay? So basically 6 or 7 in Dallas, 3 or 4 in Houston, and I say 4 because you had Trey Owens, the quarterback from Cy-Fair, Jordan Washington, the tight end from Langham Creek, and Nate Kibble, the offensive lineman out of Atascocita. It counts as 4 if you consider Matthew Golden, right? Because he's out of Houston's Klein Cain High School by way of the University of Houston. So there is still a Houston flavor. That was one of the areas, frankly, that Steve Sarkisian in the offseason said he wanted to readdress because the year before he didn't feel like he did well enough. The hit rate in Houston was not as high as it was in Dallas, okay? But they didn't offer as many guys in Houston either. This was a Dallas-heavy class, clearly. In Central Texas, other areas, and this is kind of interesting because there have been more players in Central Texas of late, but Texas only got 2, and one of them, it'd be Central South Texas. So Kobe Black and Waco Connolly, obviously true Central Texas, and then Freddie DeBose out of Smithson Valley. So that's more that South Central. But if you add Andrew Makuba again, who's from Austin, LBJ. You get up to 3 from the Central Texas area. The one that really surprised me more than anything, I mean, Texas signed more players from Florida this year than they did Houston. Okay, think about that. 4 players from Florida: Jarrett Gibson, DeAndre Robinson, Jordan Johnson-Rebel, and Michael Kern.
Wow.
That you think about that. That is 4 guys from the state of Florida. Gibson, clearly one of the top running backs in the country. Robinson, one of the top defensive linemen in the country. Kern, the top punter on their board. And then Jordan Johnson-Rebel, who he's that IMG guy, so he kind of moves around a little bit. But, I look at it, and that's not the only out-of-state group they had. They had 2 from Arizona. They're going to reach into that state with Bijan Robinson. There's no reason not to. California and Missouri, 1 apiece. Louisiana, 2. You look at that, and there's 12 out-of-state guys out of 22 signees. That's pretty impressive.
It certainly is. And for the longest time, I've got 2 points here. And first is I'm glad to see Texas touching back in with Central Texas. That had been an issue that, over time, Texas didn't necessarily pay a whole lot of attention to its backyard. And, you can point to the Westlake boys, but aside from them, where else was Texas, kind of garnering attention from the Central Texas kids? It felt like, especially in the Makuba recruitment, kids just kind of wanted to get out of town. And, Makuba's teammate at the time, Latrell McCutcheon at Austin LBJ, I know there wasn't a whole lot of compatibility with Texas, but he would tell me back in the day, he's like, Texas doesn't care about kids in Central Texas. I'm getting as far away as possible. He ended up at Oklahoma and then eventually at USC. So it kind of speaks to the, refocus of what's already around you. And the Connolly boys, as you mentioned, in the boat, tremendous. I always, used to look at, what was that, Del Valle with Braylon James as another guy who, a very talented receiver, feels like he would have been a fit. It, obviously went a different direction, but besides the point, I want to look back, Bobby, to your point about where Texas was getting these commits. And I have a little stat sheet up from the early part of July that kind of indicates where Texas was targeting and offering a lot of kids. And it's obviously Texas far and away the number 1 spot. And I think that's very important for Steve Sarkisian, because when you do offer and you attract a lot of kids in your recruiting class from out of state, sometimes it irks the Texas High School Coaching Association. It irks kind of the coaches that devote their life to Texas high school football. But when you offer kids and put them on a pedestal and elevate their brand, if you will, on a recruiting basis, it helps it goes a long way in the eyes of the Texas high school football coaches. So I always think Texas does a good job of evaluating the state first before branching out elsewhere. And that, again, when you talk about relationships, you don't want to make the Texas high school coaches mad.
And we got to remember this. Texas wasn't a hot school a year ago. They weren't. Even though they picked up Arch Manning and that recruiting class was hot, they were only 8-5 last year. They didn't come into this year with this big swing. We look back at it now and say, look where they are today. But this time a year ago, they were trying to finish out their class and did a great job, right? Yeah. But my point is, where they are today is different than where they were a year ago. And so this class, they had to reach out of state and connect on a Ryan Wingo for a national receiver. They had to connect on Brandon Baker for a national offensive lineman, right? Christian Clark and Jarrett Gibson at running back. They had to connect there. And then, I look at it and it's just one of those things where if you put it all together, they're getting and doing the right things. And you mentioned that Central Texas piece, CJ. It's a complete picture. They're not leaving things to chance. I forgot to mention the one East Texas guy, Anthony Smith. Yeah. Again, last second flip from Texas A&M. A&M had been dominating East Texas of late, right? But not now. And so I just think it's interesting how they're doing it. I also want to put this up there. How about the billboards they put in areas? Yeah, what did you? You're a younger guy, so I'm an older guy. Billboards, okay. What do you think do you think that connects with the younger kids when a Trey Owens or Parker, Livingstone, those guys see billboards of themselves up in and around their hometowns?
Absolutely. I mean, it's one of those things that everybody sees it. You know, everybody in your school, everybody in your community, at church, they're going to walk up to you and say, "Hey, man, that piece right outside the CVS, you know, up in the sky, that looks pretty neat." You know, like that's a cool deal. The entire community, and I think that was really what Sarkisian wanted to kind of, emphasize whenever he was talking about it in his signing day press conference was, you know, it's a celebration of everybody that got that young man to where he was when he signed in his gymnasium at school one day to become a Longhorn for the next 4 years. And I think that's really interesting because it's, like you said, it's one thing to woo the parents, the position coach at the high school, or even a trainer that he works out with, but to give credit and props to everybody in the community that had a hand in growing him and maintaining the, you know, kind of the path that young kid took to become a Texas Longhorn is impressive. So yeah, those kids loved it, and I really liked it. It was really cool. It was a good touch.
Yeah, I just thought it was too. All right, let's finish this off. We're going to summarize this. So 6 guys in the Metroplex for sure, possibly 7. Then you had Florida with 4, Houston with 3, but you have to include Matthew Golden. That might make 4. Central Texas 2/3 with Andrew Makuba coming back. Anthony Smith, the other in-state prospect. He's out of East Texas, down in Jasper near the Golden Triangle. And then out of state, other than Florida, you had 2 in Arizona, 2 in Louisiana, 1 in California, and 1 in Missouri. I really, you put it all together, and Texas was good in spots. I think they dominated. They dominated in Dallas, Fort Worth, and they connected nationally on some key guys. Add those two things together, and I think that's why Texas has a top 5 class overall. They did well other places in spots, right? But those 2 areas, I think, is what really has happened. And opening up Florida for Texas,
huge.
It's huge because they are, like Texas, like California, the 3 most populous states that have a ton of football talent. And so if that keeps happening, we'll see more and more from Florida. But I will agree with you on this. Next year, Texas isn't going to have to go so far away.
Yeah.
Because
bingo,
they are more of the hot school again. And so this runs in cycles. And I think because Sark has it going on the right tracks, he's going to be able to retrace his steps a little bit and not have to go out for all the big name guys or a lot of the big name guys. So, all right, CJ, anything you want to add before we get going on this one?
No, I mean, I think you touched on it. It's just the coaches next year will be able to save some air miles, you know, because it is a good 2025 class. Receiver, defensive line, offensive line especially. I think it's a good in-state bunch. They won't have to go too far.
Yeah, and they're going to be, instead of fighting everybody, I mean, I think they're going to have some ends because they've been so successful this past season.
Definitely.
All right, that's it. We're going to do that one. This one I think we're going to call Dominating in DFW, CJ. All right, but for CJ Vogel, I'm Bobby Burton. This has been On Texas Football. Hook 'em.